Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word, powered by planetf1.com. So another Formula One season has drawn to a close and what a year it has been. Early domination turned into one of the most unpredictable and competitive seasons we've had in years, with so many twists and turns along the way. But with it all over, it is time to run through the winners and losers of F1 in 2024. So I've picked out 4 of each for this one. Well, sort of, you know what I'm like, starting with a winner. And I'm sure it'll come as no great surprise to hear that the first on the winners list is world champion Max Verstappen. He was the dominant force early on in the season, winning 7 of the opening 10 races and 4 of the first 5. And it looked as though we were in for a similar season to 2023. However, as McLaren found form, Ferrari picked up the pace and Mercedes started throwing themselves in the mix. The rest of the season was not so straightforward, with the Dutchman actually going 10 races without a win and picked up victory at just 2 of the final 14 races of the year. Prior to his incredible win in Brazil, his title looked like it may well come under threat from Lando Norris, but a P17 on the grid to P1 finish on Sunday at Interlagos ensured he was all but a 4-time world champion, something he of course confirmed a few weeks later with 5th place in Vegas, despite at some races looking as though he had the 4th fastest car. Really, I suppose consistency was key, Verstappen scoring at all but one race. The one he didn't score at was his DNF in Australia, and never once failed to finish outside of the top 6. Look, for one reason or another, it was far from the perfect season for Max, but despite the issues with the car and the competition at the front, he got the job done and delivered when it mattered most. A tough season? Absolutely, but he still did manage 9 wins, 14 podiums and 437 points. So as tricky and as controversial as it was at times, it was still an excellent season overall for Max, and he is, once again, a worthy world champion. Moving on, and the first driver on the losers list is Sergio Perez. I mean, it has to be, right? Sure, he had a strong start to the year with 4 podiums from the opening 5 races, but since that top 3 finish in China, he only finished in the top 5 once, and pre-crash in Baku aside, never really showed any signs of being able to turn it around and find his form again. Now, yes, he struggled with the car, we know that, and that has got to be taken into account. However, whilst I hate comparing him to Max Verstappen, who is on a whole other level as a driver, he still should never have been as far off as he was. Max ending the season with nearly 3 times the number of points as Perez. That is shockingly bad. It is also the reason why, in many ways, Red Bull have to join him on this list. Sure, they won the driver's title thanks to Verstappen, but Perez's extremely poor performances and the team's inability to fix the car issues he was suffering with created the perfect storm, which resulted in the team going from dominant Constructors' champions to 3rd overall. Perez's struggles also meant that Verstappen was often left exposed to the likes of McLaren and Ferrari, who both had 2 drivers fighting at the front, which did put his title defence under pressure and arguably under threat. The point is, Perez should have been up there backing him and fighting them off, but he was so far away from that for most of the year. Outside of those opening few races, it's hard to find too many positives for Checo, who suffered 6 Q1 exits in 2024 and failed to make Q3 on 9 occasions in total. I know stats and points don't always tell the full story, but when you read through them and look at this season as a whole, it's not really hard to understand why Perez's future with the team was the topic of conversation for much of the year. Just as obviously as Max Verstappen being a winner, McLaren also make my winners list for 2024, having secured their first Constructors' Championship title in 26 years. Are you sick of hearing that stat yet? What makes that all the more impressive, though, is the turnaround from where they were at the start of 2023 and their rise from pretty much the back of the pack that weekend to champions by the end of the next year. That's impressive stuff, and everyone involved deserves a huge amount of credit, not least Andrea Stella. Yeah, some of their calls on track were odd in the context of the Drivers' Championship, I suppose, but when it comes to the team's title, it's understandable why they made some of them team first and all of that. It also, on occasion, seemed clear that McLaren hadn't been involved in a title fight for a long time because they made mistakes when it came to strategy in some races, costing them and their drivers points, which left the door open to Ferrari to very nearly swoop in and snatch the championship trophy from their grasp. To be fair, the indecisiveness, a lack of being proactive, and at times poor communication did improve as the season went on, and so that's a big positive. But as I say, it cost them earlier in the year. Even so, it's hard to be too critical when at the end of it all they still took the title. But with 2025 set to be super close, at least we hope it will be, they can't afford for those moments to creep in too often, if at all, next season. Next up on the losers list, it's Lewis Hamilton. It was a much better season than he's had to endure of late, and he did get himself back on the top step of the podium twice, including that excellent and memorable win at Silverstone, his 9th at the circuit. What a record. So no, not a completely awful season, with other highlights including a stunning drive from P10 to P2 in Vegas and 2 other podiums in Hungary and Spain. However, whilst it wasn't all bad, it was still a tough season which saw him fail to make Q3 on 6 occasions, including 4 Q1 knockouts. He was also pretty solidly beaten by George Russell in the teammate battle, losing 19.5 in qualifying, 15.8 in the races, and was 22 points behind him in the final championship standings as he finished outside the top 6 for the first time in his Formula One career. He has also at times this season cut a frustrated figure, and the closer we got to the end of it, the more vocal he was about wanting the year to end so he could move on to the next chapter of his career, kind of understandably. And it was clearly and obviously an emotional Mercedes send-off following the season finale, and although the last 3 years have been difficult, there's no doubt about that, the success they enjoyed together was just incredible. That, though, is a story for another day. Back to the winners list, and it's a driver who has had an excellent season in my opinion, and that is Nico Hulkenberg. He's been so strong for Haas in 2024, especially when it came to qualifying, but he also delivered consistently on race day 2, which helped him secure 41 points in total, which interestingly enough is more than the team scored as a whole in each of the last 5 seasons. He didn't quite make it into the top 10 in the standings though, missing out by a point to Pierre Gasly, and the team did also lose out to Alpine in the battle for 6th in the Constructors, but still a great season for Hulkenberg, and to be fair, and perhaps as a result, for Haas too. Hulkenberg's back-to-back 6th place finishes in Austria and Silverstone were one of the highlights of the season for him, no doubt about that. But he also comfortably beat his teammate in the quali, race and points head-to-heads, and frankly, I think he's going to be a big loss to the team in 2025 as he leaves to return to Sauber ready for the Audi switch. Back to the losers list then, and it is Aston Martin, but there is a positive spin which I'll get to in just a moment. Yes, really. In terms of performance, though, it's been bitterly disappointing, and in many ways, 2024 was a continuation of the decline they started to hit in 2023. They did have a decent start to the year, though, with points at each of the opening 7 races and 8 of the first 9. And in fairness, they did actually, thanks largely to Fernando Alonso, who, by the way, was once again excellent, all things considered this year, score more consistently than I thought before writing this video. They were, though, very much in no man's land in the standings and at times in the races too, finishing fairly comfortably clear of Alpine in 6th, but well behind Mercedes in 4th. The thing is, though, given the expectation and the ambition of that team, it was still overall a very disappointing year with very few memorable high moments. Now, that positive spin that I was talking about is the continued development of the team's facilities with the new regulations looming large, and of course, the signing of design legend Adrian Newey in a huge boost to the Silverstone team. What a signing. The final entry on my winners list is a double because, you know, it's nearly Christmas and I like to treat you and all that, and they are Pierre Gasly and Alpine, and it feels strange putting them on the winners side of things, I've got to say, because until fairly recently I was preparing for those to be on my massive losers list. After all, their first phase of the season was absolutely awful, with just 1 point scored in the opening 7 races, although the form did improve in the summer with a run of 4 straight points finishes, including a pair of doubles, before falling off again as the team looked set to end the season in a lowly 9th place. Enter Brazil and the weekend that changed everything for them in 2024. In very difficult conditions, both Esteban Ocon, who at one stage looked untouchable and comfortable out front, and Pierre Gasly as well, were absolutely fantastic and brought home a double podium for the team, which thrust them into P6. That was backed up across the remainder of the races by some excellent qualifying and race performances from Gasly, who finished 5th in Qatar and 7th in Abu Dhabi, to help the team beat Haas and RB to that 6th place finish in the championship and take a top 10 finish in the driver's standings too. Must say as well, had it not been for his engine going bang in Vegas, where he started 3rd on the grid, he could have picked up even more points. So to sum up Alpine's season, poor start, excellent finish. My final entry on the losers list for this year is, again perhaps unsurprisingly, Sauber, and what a thoroughly miserable season they have endured. The best race of the year for them was without doubt Zhou Guanyu's superb drive to P8 in Qatar, a race which also saw Valtteri Bottas finish in 11th place, which was his best result of the season. Other than that, 11th for Zhou at the season opening Bahrain was about as good as it got. Horrible pit stops and a lack of overall pace plagued them at the start of the season, and as others continued to move in the right direction with development, Sauber pretty much got stuck where they were and couldn't keep up with their rivals. As a positive, the signs were there in the latter stages of the season that perhaps the team are on the up, but to be honest, it's not like they could have fallen any lower, is it? A couple of honourable mentions before I get onto a driver I really struggled to place this year. Given his teammate made the losers list due in part to the fact that he was beaten by him, there's probably a fair argument that George Russell should be on the winners list. Not just for beating Lewis Hamilton over the course of the year, but also for his 2 wins, 4 poles and his 6th place finish in the standings. It is also very obvious to me that Daniel Ricciardo and Logan Sargent make the losers list because they lost their seats mid-season-ish. Sargent, who had not stepped up enough despite the team keeping faith with him at the end of 2023, was dropped ahead of the Italian Grand Prix, having scored no points. And Ricciardo, who did, to be fair, suffer some bad luck and poor strategy calls, found himself out after Singapore, having lost out to Tsunoda to that point and as Red Bull started to look to the future. And to round things off today is a driver I've really struggled to place because I think it could be argued he is a winner but also a loser. So I've put him in a brand new category I'm calling bit of both, I guess. Catchy, I know, and that is Lando Norris. He's had an excellent season, his best in F1 and by some margin as well, with 8 poles, 4 wins, 13 podiums, 374 points, and finished as runner-up in the championship to Verstappen. He's also delivered some fantastic drives with dominant displays at Zandvoort, Singapore, and to a lesser extent Abu Dhabi. However, 2024 does still feel like a bit of a missed opportunity, which despite his very strong year, could still see some argue he should be on the losers list. Not everyone bought into it, but he did have an outside shot at winning the Drivers' Championship, and after his sprint win and Verstappen's P17 in qualifying in Brazil, it did look as though the tide was turning, but he never got the point swing he needed to bring himself fully into play. Yes, that is in part due to some interesting calls by the team when it came to the now infamous papaya rules and strategy 2, as already mentioned, but Lando has to take some of the responsibility as well. Again, 8 times he started from P1, but only managed to convert 3 of those into maximum points. Lacked in what pundits were calling the exploiting the rules game, I suppose, versus Verstappen, although perhaps not massively surprising, and he also made mistakes along the way too. He'll definitely have learned a few lessons this year though, and he may well on reflection view this as one that got away, but those lessons he learned could well set him up nicely for 2025. But anyway, those are a few of my F1 winners and losers for F1 24, but what do you make of the list? There were others, trust me, who could have made it onto one of those lists, so do you agree with my picks? Who would you add to or remove from that list, and where on earth would you place Lando Norris? You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and for the latest Formula One news and reaction, head on over to planetf1.com. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.